Hey everybody, this is Jason Jimenez with the Bold Saviors, making the impossible possible in business. And so today I have a very dear friend of mine by the name of Amy Williams that is here by way of currently, I think you've been traveling the world in the last couple months or last month or so. And I'm really thank you for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's been great. And I cannot wait to tell your story and share where you started and where you're at now and basically the in-betweens. And so for the people who don't know who you are, would you mind sharing who is Amy? What is she? What company do you have or what companies do you operate? A little bit about your background.
Well, I am an attorney turned marketer, and I was a litigator for 7 full years before I decided to retire and hang my hat up on that, but I still maintain my license. So I'm a licensed attorney in the state of California. And my husband came to me in 2007 and said, Amy, print is dying. And he was in the print business. That's what his expertise was. And I said, what do you mean print is dying? He said, print is dying. And if we don't make changes, our lifestyle is going to be impacted. And he came to me one day and said, I would really like to start my own company doing what I'm doing and do it for myself. And I, of course, was super unsupportive. I thought he was crazy. I told him as much. And fast forward 7 months, I was standing in Times Square and looking at a bus shelter, which normally would have had one of my husband's clients' products in it, a movie poster, title, an advertisement of some sort, paper product. And I called him up, and I'll never forget this. I was using my pink Razor flip phone, if you remember those. And I called him up and I said, Brian, I'm standing here in Times Square and I'm standing next to a bus shelter and you're not going to believe what I'm seeing. And he goes, what are you seeing? And I said, I am not looking at a posted advertisement. I'm looking at a digital TV screen. Mm. And he was quiet for a moment and he goes, now do you get it? And I'm like, wow, yes, darn it. And so a year later, AB Unlimited was opened and our first client was Sony Studios and referrals came after that. And about 2 years after our company opened, I was taking a sabbatical from law. And I wandered into the office and he had this bag on his desk with a logo printed on it. And it was one of his end users for the LA Marathon that was being passed out to all the participants. And I saw this bag. I'm like, this is cool. What are you working on? It's like, I just ordered 50,000 of those for the LA Marathon. And I said, cool. How much did you buy them for? And he tells me how much he bought them for. And it didn't take a rocket scientist. And I figured out actually the true cost of what that bag cost. And I went back to him and I said, did you know this bag that you paid XYZ for actually cost ABC? And he looks me dead in the eye and he goes, handle it. And a month later, not knowing anything about the promotional product industry, we created a division for promotional products. And when our company first started that division, it was 30% of the company revenue. And today it's 90% of the revenue. And we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of running a 7-figure business ever since then. And this year we're celebrating our 15th year in business.
Beautiful.
Yes.
So he was working in the print industry. What made him say, honey, I want to start my own? What motivated that?
I think Brian had a really crazy knack for foreseeing the future.
Okay.
He knew that print was dying.
Yeah.
And he knew that the lifestyle that we had, the things that we enjoyed, the goals that we had as a family weren't going to be realized if we kept on the same path. He saw the trends before the trends became trends.
Yeah.
And sure enough, we opened up AB Unlimited during the crash. It was 2009 when we formally opened. The crash was about a year earlier. And 2 years later, all of the legitimate, huge print companies nationwide all of a sudden we're closing up shop.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember back in the day, and this is how old I am, back in the day, you could go to a car dealership and you got this fancy brochure, 50, 100 pages, and you could build your car based on, oh, I like this, I like that, I want that color, I want this trim. And people made a lot of money printing those car manufacturing books.
Yep.
But in 2011, there was no need for that because you could build that car online. So a lot of people lost their jobs. Yep. So in 2011, there was another in our industry. There was another crash, and a lot of print shops went out of business. And the one thing that was constant was marketing collateral, and everybody needed marketing collateral. I mean, sure, you could advertise in newspapers and magazines. You could do radio. You could do print TV ads. But the one thing that remained, and the one thing that had an 85% recall with the consumer, was a printed promotional product. So we seized on that opportunity and we ran all the way.
It's interesting how timing is sometimes everything. And yet, at the same time, what I'm also hearing is having the foresight of not just sticking to the guns, but you also really have to think about what the environment is really saying and then adjusting to it.
Well, here's the funny thing about our company. Every 18 months, we go through growing pains. In some form or fashion, we have to adjust and we have to be able to be adaptable and flexible to those growth changes. I mean, it could be something where it's personnel related, or it could be something where you need the resources and tools to be able to automate your workflow. What vendors are you using? Anything in your process, for whatever reason, like clockwork, every 18 to 24 months, we have to readjust and reevaluate and make changes. If we don't make those changes, we remain stagnant.
Okay, got it. And so let's take a step back before that, because growing up, did you always want to be an attorney?
No, actually. I wanted to be an agent. I wanted to be a Hollywood agent. I wanted to work in the film industry. I wanted to work in movies. I wanted to make movies. And everything that I did, internships that I took in college, even during law school, all of the internships that I took were working for a film director, a producer, a management company. I even did background work because I wanted to see what a live set looked like, what it was like to work on it. And I knew that I wasn't pretty enough to be in front of the camera, but I was sure as hell smart enough to be behind the camera. So everything that I did was designed to go down that path. But when I graduated from law school, all of a sudden you're 6 figures in debt from law school. And I'm like, ooh, do I really want to start in the mailroom at William Morris Agency for $10 an hour? Or what? I can make $300 an hour as a lawyer? So it was a no-brainer, and eventually took law as my path.
And so law as a trade is not just one vertical. There's multiple.
Yes.
So what vertical did you focus on?
I actually took the first job that I could get, and was working for a small firm in California, and they represented financial institutions. So I really got to learn a lot about contracts, a lot about breach of contracts, a lot about collecting on contracts that have been breached. It taught me a lot about customer service because I ran a litigation department in their satellite office in Southern California. I had to go out and network. I had to go out and rainmake. Yeah. So a lot of valuable skills, especially when you're working with a small firm. And a lot of solo attorneys out there, they have to wear multiple hats.
Sure.
So honestly, I think that was my real first exposure to what it was like to being an entrepreneur and having to wear multiple hats.
Yeah, especially being in the back end, because you're dealing with the meats and potatoes of the standard of how things should operate, at least on a contractual basis.
And communication was a main thing. I mean, yes, I was going into court and communicating with opposing counsel and communicating with judges, but also learning to communicate within the corporate environment, within your own office. I remember after my first year, I was thrilled to be hired that first year. But then after a year and I realized exactly what I was doing, I thought, I don't think this is commensurate with my tasks.
Yeah.
So did a little bit of research and then put together a plan and a pitch and went to my employers and said, I think this is really reflective of what I'm bringing to the table. And I landed you a $250,000 client. So being able to negotiate as well and advocate for yourself was a valuable learning tool that I learned.
Did you always know that you had the ability to negotiate or to create?
No. In fact, when we started AB Unlimited, 2 years after, Brian said, okay, I really think you need to go in sales because you're a natural. I was COO. I was running the operations of the company, but I wasn't selling.
Yeah.
And I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified to sell. And I told him that. And I said, I hired the sales coach. I identified a client that was a dream client that we wanted to go after. And the sales coach said, I happen to know that client and I happen to know their purchasing director. Don't even bother. You will never get in there. They've had the same vendors for 10 or 20 years. Don't even bother. 6 months later, we were in a bid situation and we were one of the 2 contenders for this client. So lesson number 1 was, yes, work with experts. Yes, work with coaches, but also be able to make your own informed decisions and trust your gut. The second thing I learned is I could sell. Brian finally came to me one day and he's like, I don't understand why you need all these coaches. He's like, you are a born salesman. And I said, how do you figure? He's like, Amy, for 7 years, you went into court every day and you sold a line of goods to a judge so they would rule in your favor.
Yep.
And when he turned that perspective, everything shifted.
Yeah.
That completely shifted my perspective of how I saw myself.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes we sell ourselves short as individuals, and we sell ourselves short in the business sector as well because we somehow believe these stories that we internalize, but they're really not our stories.
Yeah.
But we tell them and we believe them.
Yep.
So that changed everything for me. So I dropped the coach that said I would never get that client. And by the way, we won that bid and it was $1 million contract.
That's awesome.
And, started saying, okay, I'm going to have to take a leap of faith. Brian and I are going to have to jump off the edge of the cliff, holding hands. And thank God I have a partner that I can hold hands with while we're jumping down. But eventually you're going to have to take that risk. And the only thing that you can do is prepare for the opportunity so that when you get to the bottom of that cliff, you have as big a safety net as possible.
Yeah, 100%. So through the years, in the perspective of now knowing that you're a rock star in selling, that you can sell
I wouldn't
anyone.
say that.
So here's this. From the outside in, right? You have been able to accomplish closing some of the probably most influential entities that are in the world.
We've been blessed.
In just that note, without going into any details, to others, they're like, how? And like, I couldn't do that, right? There's that internal dialogue of like, I could never see myself doing that. So for the intention of the audience, what would you say that you know now in when you're going into a negotiation or when you're going and prepping for a negotiation to close something? Is there a process for that? What is that process, or what is it that you prepare for to get to the point where you're like, I'm getting this, outside of the fact that you're telling yourself, I'm getting you?
You mean you win some and you lose some, right? I think preparation is key. And preparation is something I'm very good at. Even when I was practicing law, I wanted to make sure that I could prepare for any viable outcome that would be thrown at me in court, because you just never know what's going to happen. The only thing you can do is be prepared. And one of Brian's favorite sayings is being prepared for when the opportunity presents itself, you're able to seize on it.
Yeah.
And that is one of our actual mantras for AB Unlimited. And we've been blessed that we can curate a client roster where we actually identify those companies that align with our values, that we think would work within our workflow process, that we think we could service with excellence.
Yep.
And, you know, are they in turn a good client? Do they pay on time? Are they easy to work with? Are they genuinely good people? Because nobody has time to work with individuals that really don't mesh well with either out of alignment with your values, out of alignment with your workflow process, because that's not profitable.
Yeah.
So we vet companies for about 6 months before we even approach them. And we do our due diligence. We do our research. I won't give away all of the secret sauce,
Sure.
but we go deeper than what's on the surface level. Not just the name of the company, not just the company reputation or what the perceived company environment and atmosphere is like. We go actually, who is working in this company? Who would we be dealing with? And then finding out about them. What are their values? What is important to them? What are their pain points? So we have done almost a full corporate psychological eval on this prospect before we even approach them. Once we've done that, when we walk into that first meeting, we don't talk about product. We don't talk about our services or what we can do better for them than their current vendor list can do. We want to know, what do they want? What are their pain points? We go in to make a friend, because a true partnership means that there's synergy going both ways, not just one-ended. We don't want to be a vendor that they just call and it's purely transactional.
No.
We want it to have synergy. So oftentimes that first meeting, we're not talking about what we can bring to the table. We want to know more about them, what their goals are. And in the back, we're thinking, okay, this is how we're going to make a playbook for them. And in the next meeting, that's when we wow them.
Was it always that way, or did your evolution in these last 14 years evolve into that type of process?
It evolved into that type of process. Oftentimes when entrepreneurs start up, you take whatever comes into the door.
Yeah.
That's not profitable. So we quickly realized that if we wanted to be successful and scale efficiently, then we had to trim back. And when we made that first evaluation, this was about 4 years after we opened up the company, we started working on our customer persona, which took us almost 3 years to perfect. And once we identified what our customer persona was, that's when we said, okay, we trimmed back 30% of our client roster, which is a scary number. But we did it, and instantly the following year, we scaled even more, because we were able to focus on what our true expertise was, the type of client that we could service, and making sure that it was a synergetic relationship. Not very many entrepreneurs do that.
No, and
They don't.
And I think that a lot of people probably don't even put themselves in the client's eyes of, if I was the client or the end user, what would I want to experience? And even in that perspective creates different questions, which create different solutions. And I agree with you. I don't think that a lot of people look at it from that perspective, or they don't make the time. They just focus. I mean, I'll give you a question. It's like, there's a question that I speak to one of our communities, LBW, and the question is always, what problem and issue do you solve for the clients that you serve? And I will tell you that 9 out of 10 people will always give me the solution and never answer the question. The question isn't about your solution. The question is, what problem and issue are you solving? The solution is what you created because of it. Human nature just puts us in a position of just going straight to, I solve.
Yeah.
And it gives a perspective of, have they gotten to that 4th, 5th year where you're talking about, of really understanding that I don't have time for this.
Well, oftentimes too, entrepreneurs, they're not looking at their metrics.
No.
They're not looking at their business ops. I know exactly to the penny how much it costs to run our company.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people do that, especially when they're solopreneurs.
Yeah.
They either think it's not important, or they don't have time
Yeah.
to do it. And I think that is where they're selling themselves short. We learned quickly, early on, that we had to know those metrics in order for us to scale, in order for us to even identify where our broken windows are, where we need to improve, what we need to change, how can we become profitable. That first company that we won that $1 million contract with, we scaled so quickly and we had no understanding of what that was going to do to our bottom line. And we quickly had to make sure that we created a workflow that was profitable, because that company wasn't profitable at first. It wasn't until we created a workflow that was synergetic between the two that would allow us to become profitable and not allow us to put them on the chopping block as one of those 30% that we cut.
You and your husband have been working together since obviously somewhat day one.
Yes.
Right? Describe to me, one, I know this because I've lived this, but working with a spouse is great, but it can also be extremely difficult. And how have y'all been able to make it work?
So early on, we decided we're going to honor each other's expertise. Brian came from the print industry. I defer to him on everything print. To this day, if he's taught me pretty good, I've got a pretty good eye for color, but I will still defer to him on layout, design, print, all of that. He manages our financial and our accounting department. So he manages all of that. He's the one with the spreadsheets. He's the one looking at the bottom line daily. And I manage all of the legal ops, obviously, because I have the legal background. I manage all the client relations, and I manage all of the vendors.
Got it.
All of the negotiating of the contracts, the terms, all of that. And we don't step into each other's lane. Unless there's a decision that should be made by both principals, we are autonomous when it comes to those, and we don't step into each other's lane.
And if I hear you correctly, it's because you already know this is my domain, this is your domain, and this is the domain that we share together.
Yes.
Because it's already pre-negotiated, if you will.
Well, accounting was his background.
Yeah.
So before he got into print, right after college, he was in accounting for several years. So numbers is his thing.
Yeah.
And that was his natural inclination to be able to be in charge of that. And that was something that he did well. And that was what he wanted to do. As far as legal, it was already predetermined.
Yeah, because even in the way you describe it, your prep of the prospects that you go after or that you engage, there's a lot of similarities to your legal background that is integrated into that process. Like your prep work is done, if not flawlessly, because you just want to mitigate or eliminate the perspective of them saying no.
Not everybody's a good client. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that say, oh yeah, I have this client and they bring me 7 figures, but is that 7 figures profitable?
Yeah.
And we've come up with a formula, quite frankly. And not only do we do all of that prep work with the vetting process of the prospect, but we also have a formula. And it's something that we do with our current clients too. And we evaluate them once a year. This formula, this different columns. And, column A could be something like, okay, do we like working with them? Do they pay on time? Column B. Column C, what kind of volume are they bringing in? Column D, what kind of volume are they bringing in? Not just the number of revenue, but the actual, how many times do we interact with them throughout the year? Column E could be, how many times do we have to touch their project before it becomes unprofitable? And that's the other thing that we discovered, is that when we're working on a project, there are 11 steps. From the time they contact us, from the time they pay their invoice, there are 11 steps. And if you complete their project within those 11 steps, that's a profitable project.
Yeah.
And we've discovered, okay, 12 through 30 steps, not as profitable, but still profitable.
Mm-hmm.
31 steps to 50. Okay, now this is becoming not so profitable. 50 touches and over, it's a dead dog.
Yeah, you're bringing something to light where I think if you ask someone as you get to know them, could you explain or share your client journey? The people who can't explain their journey of what a client should expect, to me, it's always an indicator of there's a problem, there's a missing, or they're not who they really say who they are.
That I'm going to give credit to the amazing Dan Gretsch, who is an amazing business coach who runs BizHack Academy out in Florida. He got a hold of us during the pandemic, and really taught us the value of a customer journey.
Yeah.
And because of his teachings, we were able to create our customer journey. And that's how we became, that's how we created this formula.
Yeah.
And knowing how profitable a project can be, how profitable a client can be. And we sat there and we went through the customer journey. And when we were going through this map, we realized, oh my God, this sucks. Like, I do not want to be the client. How can we make this better?
Yeah.
So we
lost opportunities.
Yeah.
Forever, right?
And not just lost opportunities, causing the client aggravation. The number one thing you don't want to do is cause the client aggravation. How can we minimize that? How can we minimize their aggravation?
Yep.
And so we started building in to the workflow process, the customer journey. And that's how we were able to close those gaps, fix those broken windows.
Yeah. So into what you just said, because it's so underrated, and I think it's so unappreciated to a lot of entrepreneurs of understanding the client journey. And yet, you and I as principals may understand the why, the impact internally and externally to our end users, the people who actually buy our services. But it's a different conversation to the people who work for us or with us of making sure that they get the buy-in. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about that. How did you take this aha moment of like, wow, look at what we're doing and what we're not doing and the impact it's having and the turmoil that we're making and for our clients? How did you get that message down to the people that work with you who are actually doing the tactical work to buy into it?
We create a lot of training videos, and that's something that I found has really helped reinforce that message. So when we bring someone on board, we cross-train them, but we also give them what we call little seminars. And it's probably a good 2 months of immersive training where we have these training videos already ready to go, and they can utilize these training videos on tasks and whatnot. But when it comes to the philosophy of AB Unlimited and how we approach things and how we expect to approach our clients and the different ways that our clients can react, those are actual seminars that we give to our team so that they really understand the philosophy behind of why we do what we do.
Yep.
And it's not just because, when you were little and your parents said, oh, because I said so. And we just never really understood that because it wasn't a satisfying answer.
Yep.
But now we say we do this because this is what the result is going to be for the client. This is how the client is going to perceive this.
Yep.
And honestly, just taking the time to have that written out for your team, it's super important.
What would you say thus far has been one of the most rewarding or most accomplished thing that you and your husband have been able to accomplish since day one to present day that you would say, I'm proud of this? What would that be?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there have been, I can think of two actually. I think winning that first contract really set the stage because nobody thought we could do it.
Yeah.
Everybody bet against us, and we came in as the dark horse, literally, and was able to come up victorious. And that set the stage. That is actually for the first time for both of us where we thought, oh my gosh, we can really do this. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the second one, recently we did an acquisition of another promotional products company. And one of the client niches in that is the education sector, where we support this educational program nationwide with marketing collateral. We support their programs with marketing collateral. And one of the programs that we work with in the state of Texas, that program had 6 underrepresented students who participated in this program to be able to get to the pathway to college. 6 students received 4-year full ride scholarships to their university.
It's beautiful.
6 in one program, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
These 6 students, their lives are forever changed. Their families' lives are forever changed. And now these 6 students are going to go out into the community when they finish college, and they're going to impact their community in ways that if they had not had that opportunity, they would not have been able to do that. So I think out of all of the things that we have participated in, being a part of that, even no matter how small of a role we played with that program and their marketing collateral, the fact that 6 students received 4-year rides.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a beautiful thing.
So how does that tie back to the culture that you have worked really hard to making sure that you have within your company?
We're a family first corporation. And what I mean by that is part of the reason why I retired from law is it was very stressful going into court and beating up on people for a living with my words. It was very stressful. And I didn't like how I felt when I came home from doing that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that my mother said to me literally a week before she passed, she said, if you don't like law, that's okay. Get out. And when she passed, the day she passed, I was of counsel for a firm assisting their litigation department. I called them up and I said, send someone to pick up the files. I'm done. And I took 9 months sabbatical, and I was grieving in a way that was very profound. The day my mom passed away, she passed away in 1:00 in the morning. That evening before, I was driving home from a 2-hour commute, and I could have easily stopped off the freeway and gone to see her. And I didn't. It was hot. I was grumpy. I was tired. I thought, I'll just see her tomorrow. Of course, tomorrow never came. And I told myself I would never own a company where an employee had to make a decision to choose work over family. And that always stayed with us. And we've been true to that. I remember when one of our employees, her husband had an accident and broke his neck. And this is one of our lieutenants. We really relied on this individual. She was a wonderful woman. She's still around. And she comes to us, she's like, I don't know what to do. And I said, first of all, go be with your husband, go take care of him. When a couple days go by and the dust settles, tell us what you need from us. Yeah. And we'll make it happen. So she comes back, she's like, okay, well, he's going to be bedridden for about 3 months. And she's like, obviously I can't stay off work for 3 months, but he can't be alone. And I said, okay, what would you like to do? If you'd like to continue working, we'll set you up at home and you can work from home. This was well before pandemic. And our office had actually been cross remote since 2015. So when the pandemic hit, it was nothing new for us to work remotely.
Yep.
So we set her up with a full home office at her home, and she was able to care for her husband and work at the same time and be there for her family. And that is exactly why we do what we do and why we work so hard, because we want to make sure that family comes first.
To those individuals, entrepreneurs that are afraid of going hybrid or fully remote because I'm going to say they lack trust. They are fearful of losing control. what would you say to them? How are you able to give them confidence to say, it's okay, you just got to think of this, this, and this?
Well, we had the same misgivings as well. In 2015, I was involved in a program called the Toyota Mentorship Program. And Toyota had put together a program where they chose 5 companies nationwide, and our company was one of them. So we really had the benefit of 2 C-suite mentors who mentored us for 12 months. And one of the things that we wanted to do was operate more efficiently. And to do that, we're like evaluating everything. And in the middle, right when we ended that Toyota program, I went right into the Stanford Latino Business Action Network Latino Executive Initiative program. And so we worked really hard on efficiencies for about 15 months. And what we saw was that we had employees that were dedicated to our company, but they had 2-hour commutes.
Yeah.
One way.
Yeah.
That's not efficient. It's not a quality of life for them. They're coming in, they're tired. They are having to make their, bring in a sack lunch or their lunch, for the fridge, and then face a 2-hour drive home. Like, it just didn't seem sustainable. So I was scared to go remote. Brian was scared to go remote. So Toyota held our hand while we created the infrastructure to make this happen. And one of our employees who really wanted a healthier lifestyle for herself, but didn't have time to go to the gym because she's got a 2-hour commute here, working 8 hours, 2-hour commute back. She had no time to go to the gym. When we made her remote, she joined a gym, and within, I would say, 6 months, lost 60 pounds.
Wow.
Had a healthier labs for, when she would go get her testing. And if you're an entrepreneur and you know exactly what those tasks entail, you know how long it takes to do a certain task, which of course we're metric based. So I know exactly how long it takes to do every single task in our company. By the number of emails that are going out, by the number of inquiries that are being made. You can tell by their activity on their computer. You can tell, the response time. Are they taking 2 hours to get back to you, to your colleagues or their workmates or the owners of the company?
Yep.
There's different metrics that you can use to make sure that everything is going well. We thought productivity was going to go down too. Exact opposite. Productivity went up because now they're living a healthier lifestyle.
Yep. When you were going through that transition, and then you had the moment where you have an employee who interviewed well, passed maybe the assessments or the process, and eventually get to the point where they're actually given an ability to have a better quality life, but they don't take advantage of it. What do you do?
Well, I can tell you what you should not do. Don't wait to fire them. We had a situation where we hired someone who came in and said they had $1 million book of business and that they really wanted to work for a company. They wanted X amount of dollars. They wanted a fancy title, which, had I paid attention to my gut, would not have hired this person. But because I was still feeling that lack of confidence in my newfound role as COO and as a 7-figure entrepreneur, maybe I don't know everything. And this was in between programs. So I didn't really have a team to rely on or an advisory group to rely on to say, hey, should we really make this decision?
Yep.
And we ended up hiring this individual. And not only did we hire her, we had to hire her team. And it turned out she did not have $1 million book of business. She was nowhere near that, maybe $250,000 in sales inside of 18 months, which at that time I wasn't in sales yet. And I outsold her without doing anything. So not recognizing that sooner and taking action on it really harmed our company. And as a result of that, we actually became 7 figures in debt. We were hemorrhaging, and we had to figure out what do we need to do. So at that time, I had entered in, I was in the middle of the Toyota mentorship program. So we got our Toyota mentorship mentors, we got our CPA, we had our general counsel, and we had a bankruptcy attorney because I was scared that this was the path we were going to have to go down. And we got all of them together on a weekend in September. And we said, what do we need to do to stop running and hitting a brick wall? Because we're not going to continue to do this anymore. And so the CPA says, well, you're paying insane taxes in California. Why don't we relocate your corporate headquarters to Nevada and get you a tax cut there? And then the other team, part of the team said, okay, let's explore the hybrid remote team so that you don't need this fancy 5,000 square foot office because none of your clients come to see you anyway. We have these beautiful offices, beautiful showroom. Nobody ever came to see us except for the UPS and the FedEx guy. So we're like, okay, revenue is vanity, profits are sanity, right? And this was well before Mike Michalowicz wrote his book. And so we made all of these changes, and inside 6 months, we had trimmed $250,000 off our overhead. And we started to instantly see profits going up.
Yep.
So it was really hard. It was a hard pill to swallow at first, knowing that we had made a mistake, knowing that it's not going to be the only mistake you make as an entrepreneur. Most entrepreneurs don't recover from 7-figure debt. We did.
I think that I believe, and this is opportunity for those entrepreneurs that like to invest in businesses. I believe that anyone, even ourselves, you must look at your finances of what you actually are spending on the wants and needs. Just basic questions. Is this a want or need? And I think if you look at companies in today's world, the majority of companies in today's world are spending money in things that you either don't need or overspending simply because you want an easier, better life. And I get that to an extent. But the problem I'm having with this, and what I find is, then they're struggling saying, well, where's my money going to? And you've alluded to the fact that, well, it's because you don't know where your money's going. And personality, ego, all that comes into play. And they're not realizing that you have to sacrifice today so that you don't have to sacrifice later.
And you still have to make a modicum of sacrifices daily.
Yeah.
I mean, and honestly, there's different schools of thought. For us, for our business model, accounting is the number one thing that has to be the most important aspect of your company. And to this day, I still engage in educational entrepreneur programs. I have a mentor right now who is a retired Wall Street expert who really once a month calls me up. Amy, do you really understand what this number means? What does this mean over here, this line item? Explain it to me.
Yeah.
I'm not an accountant. I'm not a math person. I'm a metrics junkie, but that doesn't mean that I understand formulas and equations and all of that, right? Like I'm still struggling with EBITDA, right? EBITDA. So making sure you're surrounding yourself with accounting, number one thing. And we have a fractional CFO that works with us and his team who takes all of our accounting, and that's what Brian manages. The second most important aspect of a company is your marketing. And not a lot of people realize that. 8% of your revenue needs to be dedicated to marketing. And that's a scary number for some people.
Absolutely.
That's a scary number for some people. And being creative with how you do your marketing, maybe that's something that entrepreneurs need to delegate that to, and you have to spend money to scale. That's just the bottom line. But I would say accounting and marketing, absolute two most important. It doesn't matter what your service is, doesn't matter what your product is. If you don't have a grasp on accounting and marketing for your company, you're probably not going to scale.
You're bringing up two things. So one is the perspective of the ability to get comfortable in, as you're growing a company, in delegating and hiring outside or bringing someone inside to focus on specific areas that either you don't like, you don't want, you hate, whatever. But then there's the other perspective that you've brought up a couple of times in this conversation is you have intentionally engaged people from the outside to either teach you, show you, or just tell you, you goofball, what are you doing?
Exactly.
And so that in itself is scary because they don't know either who to ask, how to ask, or are you open to sharing the Komodo and sharing all the bad, ugly things, right? How did you get over that?
Well,
and why did you do that?
We don't know everything. And I guess I'm a lifelong student. I'm a sponge. I love learning. And and I think the smartest thing that I can ever do for our company is say, I don't know everything. Mm-hmm. And things evolve and things change. And you have to keep up with, just like doctors, when science has merged with something new and cutting edge, they need to learn that. They need to embrace that.
Yep.
Same thing with business. You always have to embrace that. When we first started the company, about 4 years after we started the company, I heard a woman speak, and she was an entrepreneur, and she was talking about this Goldman Sachs program that she took. And she said, one of the things that she said in her speech was, I was making 10 cents on the dollar and I didn't know I was making 10 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
And she's like, this program helped me understand that, and now she's making 80 cents on the dollar, and, so I went back to Brian. I said, what do you think about taking this program? He's like, well, you can do it because, you're the one that is ops. So I think this is something that you can do. Applied for the program, and I didn't know if I was going to get accepted. It was I remember after the interview, and the VP of Goldman Sachs came down from San Francisco to personally interview me. And it was the most scariest thing I've ever been through in my life at that point. And I threw up right after the interview because I was so nervous. And I was like, for sure, we're not getting accepted. We got accepted and went through the 4 months. And as a result of that program, when that program ended, during graduation is when we were going through the bid process for this $1 million contract.
Okay.
And they helped me have the confidence to say, okay, this is what you need to do. They prepared me for that entire process.
Oh, what a gift.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was done after that. So every other year I would do a program. I won a scholarship from the Southern California Minority Development Council. They awarded me a scholarship from Wells Fargo to attend the Tuck Executive Education Program at Dartmouth. So they flew me out to Dartmouth. We stayed in New Hampshire for a week and a half, and I took this program with 80 other participants, many of whom I still talk to today. We still keep in touch. And participating in that program was life-changing.
So,
same with the Stanford program as well.
Where has imposter syndrome shown up for you, even with all the things that you've accomplished, you've done, you've gotten yourself involved in, you've experienced? Where does that show up, and does it still show up as a human?
It does. It does creep up every now and again. But again, imposter syndrome are stories that you're telling yourself that aren't true.
So what would you tell someone who's currently going through that right now?
No. Okay. One of the best pieces of advice I got from the individual who inspired me to take the Goldman Sachs program, when we were going through those changes in 2015 and making our company remote, going from corporate headquarters in California to Nevada, I was very worried about what the perception was going to be to our clients, that now we were a new entity that was organized in Nevada, and what that would look like, and would they care? And I was really worried about that. And she pulls me aside and she says, you know what, Amy? Your clients don't care what color underwear you're wearing as long as they get their projects and their deliverables on time. And I really took that to heart. And she was right. She was absolutely right. With the imposter syndrome, I remember that. And I also remember that we've prepared as best we could for any given situation. So if imposter syndrome is creeping up, it's because we did not prepare enough.
Totally agree. Yeah. So I'd like to talk about, because the journey it's never for anybody, including myself, has never been great. There's been dark moments of life lessons that have been scarred into our DNA or even our process. If you wouldn't mind sharing with us, give me a moment in your journey, in your entrepreneur journey, that still today you reflect on, but has ideally changed in how you operate, how you deliver, and how you serve.
There was a project that we had, a holiday project that we had in the early on in our career, and it was not going well, and it did not get delivered by the supplier on time. And that taught us that when projects go sideways, because they will, what resources and what experience do you have to rely on to be able to troubleshoot and problem solve that situation? Because you can't sit there and blame whatever vendor or whatever circumstance that happened that caused that situation. You cannot sit there and blame that. You have to go into problem solving mode. You have to troubleshoot. You have to come up with another solution to make sure at the end of the day, your client is made whole. That's our mantra, is what do we need to do to make sure the client is made whole and they get their deliverables on time?
Do you think everybody gets that?
No, because they don't want to spend the money. There's times where we had to invest our own money to make sure a project was completed so that the client got their deliverables on time. Their project was completed on time. And then we go back and we Monday morning quarterback. Okay, who's to blame here? Who's going to pay for what? Then we start the negotiation process with the vendors saying, okay, you dropped the ball. Here's the proof. Here's the contract. How are you going to make us whole? And then we go after there.
So you're speaking in the realm of something that I as long as I've known you, has been very important to you, is the integrity of your name and what you've committed to, what you've promised. That's a very strong trait of yours that I've, from day one. And even more so, you're very good at making people accountable in that space. Where did that come from?
You know, this might be from when I was a child. I had just a very innate sense of black and white, no gray area. And thinking about that question, I can only think of one instance with a project partner, a client, that circumstances did not go their way. They were not pleased with the outcome. We did everything to manage it. We did everything to make them whole. They were made whole. But because they had such a bad taste with this experience, they were willing to sever the relationship. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest things that I learned from one of my supplier vendors when a project went sideways, and I'm here, with my head exploding, he sat me down, and I'll never forget this. He was the executive vice president of a major supplier, and he sat me down and he said, you know what, Amy, we're going to do everything that we can to make this right. Yes, it's going to be delayed, but we're going to do what we need to do to make it right. And he says, if you're willing to sever this relationship, this partnership, because of this one project, I can't stop you from doing that. But I really want you to think about what it means to be a partner. And that blew my mind. Immediately stopped screaming and shouting. And I was like, whoa. And that took a lot of courage for him to say that.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And, I think about our incident with our client who was willing to sever the partnership, willing to write a bad review, willing to tell everybody within earshot, oh, that company, don't do business with them. Even though we did everything that we could to make them whole. And we did make them whole. It just wasn't in the way they wanted it.
Sure.
That really stuck with me. And to lead with integrity and to operate with integrity is one of the most difficult things for people to do.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes people want to resort to doing what they want to do, what will make them feel better, instead of doing the hard thing, instead of doing the right thing, which is oftentimes way harder to do.
So what is Amy's non-negotiables?
Integrity, non-negotiable. In personal life, in business, in my volunteer work, it's everything.
So when Amy is not on, right? What's Amy doing?
When Amy's not on,
Yeah. When I'm saying on, meaning I'm not selling, I'm not promoting, I'm not closing, I'm not running my operations. What's Amy doing?
Amy has two passions now. One is obviously travel.
See how she smelled, by the way?
Travel is definitely one of them. And most recently, in the last couple of years, I have begun publicly sharing my journey with Tourette syndrome. And that has taken an incredible amount of courage.
Yeah, absolutely. One that I think that has layers of that you've been peeling.
Yeah. And honestly, not a lot of people get credit for doing what they do and doing it with a disability.
Yeah.
And it's an incredibly difficult thing. It's an incredible journey for a lot of people, and to publicly share it, I want to be that inspiration for people to not have to hide their true selves.
For sure. Yeah. There's a sense of freedom of being, there's a weight that's lifted, if you will. So I also know something about you since I've got to know you, that you've had a passion. And I remember the day, it was a little past the pandemic, but they remember the day you're like, Jason, something that I'm passionate about from childhood, I'm now part of this organization with the Olympics. Talk to me about that. Share us a little bit about what's going on there.
So I was a baton twirler from a little girl all the way up to college. And I was an administrative board member for a national and an international organization. And I negotiated a merger, a union, if you will, between the two most powerful baton twirling entities in the world. And I was sat on that board as a founding member for 13 years and just recently rolled off that board. We had our last board meeting in Paris last month. And it was a difficult situation because about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I became aware of unethical practices. And when myself and two colleagues brought forth these unethical practices to the board, we were met with ostracism.
Sure.
And it was a very difficult and challenging time because I was there to serve the athletes.
And the sport wasn't available in the Olympics prior to that.
No. And in fact, I won't go into the details, but I was part of the process in the application process.
I remember, yeah.
But the application process became abandoned, which we didn't know.
Yeah.
And well, several of us on the board did not know. There were some that were aware.
Got it.
And it was a very difficult decision, but I understood that I needed to go on a different path.
Yeah, for sure. So talk to me about, because there's three things when we go through these very difficult moments in our lives, whether it be external, internal, but they're impacting us. Like, I can't sleep at night because I'm dreading whatever's happening, right?
Yeah.
I look at it from three perspectives. Who are the people in my life that are going to help me get through it? And what is it that they can do? Or what do I need to ask for? And being open to saying, I need help, which is very hard for some people. Who have you gone to and who have you relied on? And what did they share with you that helped you get through these tough moments?
In business, you surround yourself with an advisory group, an informal advisory group. There were a lot of those projects that I talked about going sideways.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had a few, and having trusted mentors in the industry, whatever industry that you belong to, having trusted mentors that you can ask a question or say, can I give you a scenario? What would you do? I'll give you a case in point on the business side. When we first won that contract and we were scaling and we were like, oh my gosh, what's going on? 50% growth year after year. We weren't prepared for that. And I was convinced that we were just doing everything wrong. Well, through the SEM SDC program, there was another competitor of ours in the same city who has way more zeros behind his number than we do, agreed to meet with me, also from Mexico, agreed to meet with me for coffee. And he sat down, and after hearing me talk for 30 minutes, convinced that I'm telling him, and I was sure he was going to say, oh my God, you have really fucked this up, right? He leans forward and he goes, Amy, I have the same problems you have. I just have more zeros behind my number. And when he said that, I was instantly relieved. Like, it was such a relief to know that
you're not alone.
I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And, having a peer community to go to, even if they're not experts in your industry, just having business peers to meet with every so often, to talk about issues, talk about challenges, talk about how are you going to scale. A business community is so important. So having that is vital. On the personal, same thing. Having trusted individuals that you admire to be able to bounce ideas off of, to be able to go to when you have a situation. And also, this is relatively new for me in the last couple of years, but having a wellness component to your life has made all the difference for us, because when you're an entrepreneur, especially 7 figures and above, there's a certain level of stress that comes with that job. Anybody who says they're not stressed running a 7-figure business, I call bullshit. And we have initiated a wellness component in our lives at our company. And that has made it really has just taken me to that next level.
Absolutely. How many mentors do you have?
Too many to count. Literally,
I asked the question is because you've alluded to different people throughout this conversation, and yet they all specialize in one specific area. They're not overlapping, and maybe some overlap, but at the end of the day, they're all a specialist in something. They have something that either you want, you need, or that they can collaborate because you can go back and forth on.
And you have to make sure it's a two-way street.
Absolutely.
That's something that I really learned. Like, I literally do have a mentor in each facet of my life.
Yeah.
And people that I greatly admire, and I'm interested in their opinion on certain matters. But you have to make sure it's a two-way street. Even if you feel as an entrepreneur and you have this high-powered mentor that you have nothing to offer them in return, you do. Asking about their day, asking about how their family's doing, how are their kids doing? If you see an article that you think, they might be interested in, or an article that you read reminded you of them.
Yeah.
Send that to them and said, this article reminded me of you.
Yeah.
Making sure your mentors, it's a two-way street, is super important.
So, technology, innovation. You yourself went through this when you were I think you said New York, when you were looking at the billboard between print and watching something on digital. How is that changing? How is that impacting your business? Where are you looking into right now to stay ahead of the game?
Well, our industry is going through another metamorphosis in that everyone fancies himself a designer, a printer, an expert of some sort. And the reason why we're cautiously optimistic in our space is because we do have expertise, and we've spent 15 years and then 25 years beyond that with Brian's print expertise, my 23 years of legal on top of that. We've carved ourselves out such an incredible expanse of knowledge and expertise and curating our client.
Yeah.
Curating our client persona.
Yeah.
Our customer persona that we're not afraid of these
because you choose
external.
you put yourself in a position where you get to choose.
Yes.
Versus just
right.
And that's a journey that doesn't happen overnight. So I would even go as far as saying, because you as an entity know exactly who you are.
Yeah, and that's an exercise in itself.
Yeah.
We actually did that. Brian and I love to do road trips. So if we have to go to a client somewhere in the country, we'll look at it, we'll see the time investment, and if we can drive there, we will drive there and hit up every national park on the way. And on one of these trips, we had a branding workshop, workbook. And we took 10 hours on that day because Brian can do anywhere from 10 to 15 hour drives daily. And we sat there with me in the passenger seat and we did this branding exercise, this workshop in 10 hours. And it was and some of them were funny and some of them we had to stop and think about quietly for 15 minutes. But questions like, if your company was a movie, what movie would you be and why? And so we each came up with our own answers, and then we compared our answers and we decided on what the answer would be.
Yep. And
collaborate on that. And one of the movies that we thought AB Unlimited was Pulp Fiction. You know, a little bit dangerous, creative as all get out, trendy, a little bit scary.
Yeah.
You know, not to be trifled with.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, if your company had a dinner of 12 strangers, who would those 12 strangers be at your dinner and why?
Yep.
You know, and just, I think that's something that companies just don't do. Small entrepreneurships, they don't do that.
Yeah.
If you're a solopreneur, are you really going to dedicate the time to sit down and go through a branding exercise for a whole day when it's just you and it's you and your product or you and your service? You're not going to do that. But I promise you, if an entrepreneur, if you do that, you will have the keys to the kingdom in your hands. Just take the time to do it.
There are two questions that have impacted me with some of my leadership team, and you met him not too long ago. He came across and he has really opened my eyes around the question of why would somebody want to work for you? And why would somebody want to buy from you in that same realm? And then the other question is, why would somebody want to stay with you? Whether it be a client or an employee. And I don't think, to your point, people take the time in really diving into that. Because it will change what you do, how you vocalize, understanding that people receive and acknowledge and hear and listen to things, not necessarily the way you deliver it.
Well, hey, look, we've been in business 15 years. I got to tell you, we still haven't defined our value proposition. Okay. So, I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
I definitely, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And it evolves. So what my answer today would be for our company might not be the same answer 6 months from now, 2 years from now.
Yeah.
It evolves.
Yeah. Because, I've loved this saying is like, you were not the same person you were a year ago. Something changed. Our business is
something
the same.
Better have changed.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
100%. Yeah. Well, for the good or bad.
Right.
It's a life lesson regardless, right? In those dark moments of entrepreneurship, what's the one life lesson that you've learned that in the moment you thought the world was ending, but today you're like, I'm so grateful that happened, and this is what I've learned from it?
I can pinpoint one moment that was particularly bleak, and we were going through that whole change with the team that we had brought in that we eventually had to part ways with. I remember it being bigger than me. I I remember it being bigger than me. And I remember driving home. It was dark and the street was a dark street. It was at night. It was late at night because we'd put in a long day. And I was in my car and I remember thinking about playing in my mind everything that was happening and what we were going through and would we be able to survive it and what was going to happen, the unknown, how scary that was. And I remember my hands were on the steering wheel and I remember taking my hands off the steering wheel and looking up and saying, God, I cannot do this on my own. I need your help. I need your help. And then I put my hands back on the steering wheel and then drove down the block, parked in front of our house. 3 things happened in the following 6 weeks. A client that owed us 6 figures paid their bill. The lease that we were in the midst of a 5-year lease and we were only on our we were only 2.5 years in. 5-year lease, probably worth $40,000 remaining. We had asked the leasing agent to talk to the owner prior to that night. The next day, the leasing agent called and said, the owner is completely okay if you want to vacate. He's not going to charge you for the remainder half of the lease the 2.5 years left. He's not going to sue you. He's like, if you just get out quickly so that he can get it relet, that would be fantastic. Who does that? Like, that was a gift from God, straight up.
Yeah.
And then we had another similar thing that just happened that worked in our favor. Like, that was huge. And that really started my self-awareness on how impactful the universe can be when you ask for help and you're truly like abandoning your ability to solve that problem because you just aren't able to.
That's right.
That was really powerful. I'll never forget that moment.
It's beautiful. You lead me into another question. You and I have been part of communities, and some of them we've been in communities together. Why do you think, even though, okay, here's a scenario. Just even between you and I. We've known each other for 5 years?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah. And so if I have a problem, an issue, personally or professionally, I would call you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you're in.
And I think we have mutually.
We have.
We have mutually consulted with each other.
We have at difficult moments.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't people actually look at the people that they already have in their life to ask for help enough? Why don't they do that?
It's got to be a trust factor. There has to be a semblance of trust.
And let's assume that there is, right?
Trust and respect, maybe.
Okay, yeah. My experience thus far, even with the audience even with the guests that I've had before, previous to yourself, and or even in the community of LBW that we have, the one constant thing that I find is that people don't ask for help enough.
They don't. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to ask for help.
Yes. And what you just opened my eyes on was there has to be a significant impact for it to just say, okay, I have no other option. I need to ask for help. That's a lesson in itself. And just being willing to give in and really be okay with it.
Well, it comes back to that awareness.
Yeah, 100%.
A lot of people are not aware.
Yeah. Your husband, if he was here right now, what would he say? Who is Amy?
Fearless.
What does your company do?
Our company supports entertainment studios, education institutions, marketing and advertising agencies, food and beverage industry, hospitality industry, and retail manufacturers with marketing collateral.
What makes you different than what your competitors in our market does? How are you different than the rest?
We are not transactional. We're not a transactional company. You have Amazon and you have other online purveyors for that. We are concierges in marketing collateral.
What would you say that the biggest value that they will receive simply just by engaging you?
Everything we touch turns to gold. We helped one of our university clients raise $6.5 billion for their endowment. And we supported their schools, their independent schools inside the university.
Yep.
We supported their galas with unique, designed often by me, products that they raised $6.5 billion.
That's incredible.
You can often find our products on eBay being resold because of the wow factor.
Where is the company heading?
The company during the pandemic went through a serious downturn because of a lack of events during the pandemic. And we used that downtime wisely. And I created 4 new companies as a result of that. We started AB Golf, which is a golf merchandise, branded golf merchandise company to support golf tournaments, to support executives who golf, who want to use it as employee recognition, who want to use it as sales prospecting tools. That was a fun one. In fact, I think you saw me go through that process. Launched it from inception to launch was 4 weeks. So I'm really proud of that one. We also opened up a company called the El Paso Gift Company, which is a beta test company for small markets that don't have access to, a Nordstrom's or a Bloomingdale's or a Tiffany's, but want quality, high-end products to be able to give as corporate gifts. And the idea behind that is to train community in what it's like to run a company, to do personal service, to do delivery on these corporate gifts, and open them and launch them in markets that are very small, that have don't want to rely on online purveyors for these things, and that can do same day service.
Yep.
And the last one that I'm particularly proud of is catnappers. And we adopted a pandemic kitty, and we adopted it through a service, cat rescue. And these foster parents for these kittens, they pay for everything. They pay for food, they pay for litter, they pay for the maintenance and the upkeep, the shots, oftentimes the care until these kittens are adopted out. And so we came up with a fleece blanket that the community would advertise on, and would be given free of charge to these foster parents and also to the foster adoptive parents, as well as giving them to shelters to support the kittens and the cats that are in these shelters waiting to be adopted out. So I'm a cat lover, and this is something that I'm very passionate about.
So that brings me to the question of cause-related marketing. So I find that a lot of companies, regardless of size, they want to get involved with some cause, but they don't know how. They don't know why. Or is it going to take away from the core of what they do?
And they need to be aligned with their values as well.
That's right. So what would you say to them? And how much of an impact of why they should have a cause-related marketing initiative?
I think there's 2 things that need to happen for a current company to thrive in today's environment and to move forward in the future. 1 is making sure you have some sort of digital marketing component to your company. And 2, having a community-based component to your company as well, meaning you're involved with a cause, you're involved with a charity or a program that benefits your community, you're involving that community inside that cause as well, and you're loud and you're proud about it. Oftentimes people think, I don't want to announce this is what I'm doing because, they feel like they're bragging about it.
Yeah.
But if nobody knows what you're doing, they can't get involved.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because I think we find a lot of people, like, We have so many wins that in our individual lives we have, but we don't share them. That's the sad thing for me.
Yeah. One of the nonprofits that I want to start making more of a nonprofit as opposed to a for-profit. In the pandemic, we had so much time on our hands because we were on Clubhouse, 10 hours a day? And I belong to a couple of community boards in our industry. And a lot of these, smaller distributorships, they were scared and they were making bad decisions, that affected their company, that could affect their personal lives as well. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to need to step in here because I'm normally not one who will say, I'm a lawyer and this is my opinion unless I'm directly asked. But it really became such a situation. I thought, Amy, there were people there for you.
Yeah.
You need to now step it up and be there for them. So we created this entity called the Promo Lawyer, and it was by one of them. I was one of them. And I started off by mentoring 4 or 5 distributorships and, got them to scale. And then I kind of formalized the Promo Lawyer and joined a mentoring program. And I mentored about 4 more companies, smaller distributorships, and really, really proud of the work that I did with that because one of the distributorships listened to every word I said. You know how you mentor someone, but they don't listen and they certainly don't take the advice that you impress upon them? This one distributor did, and he went from 600,000 to 2 million.
Beautiful.
Because he listened to everything I told him. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So I know it works.
And actually, it's a testament to the contribution.
Yeah. And, so making sure that people have access to affordable legal services.
Yeah.
Just reviewing a contract or having disclaimers on your documents so that when your client, doesn't pay you, you know what the recourse is and they know what the recourse is.
Yep.
So making sure the Promo Lawyer has a bigger presence in our industry, in the promotional product industry, is something that I'm going to really start focusing on because it's really needed. There's one thing that this world, especially in the United States, is sorely needed is affordable legal services and affordable healthcare.
Strategic partners. Who are they for you? What's your methodology or process of acquiring them, and who are they?
Partners in terms of vendors?
No, partners and strategic partners that open doors, create access.
Oh, champions.
Yeah.
We call them champions.
Okay, got it.
We are nothing without our champions. In fact, the foundation of AB Unlimited was built by our champions. That bid that we won back in the day, it was because one of our clients left a company and went to this company and was able to tell us, hey, there's this opportunity coming up. You need to be prepared for it when it comes.
Yeah.
And we have a champion in almost every client that we have, and you treat them like gold because those are the ones that help you build your foundation. They're the ones that open doors for you. Champions aren't always people that you do business with. I will make that very clear. In 2012, one of our biggest champions was a woman named Arlise Lamb, and she was an absolutely dear woman. She's no longer with us today. She was my first mentor at Disney. And she helped us so much, took the time of day for a little company like ours to be able to say, you need to get a hold of your supply chain. Come back and see me in 6 months. You need to get a hold of your design services. Come back and see me in 4 months. And she was a wonderful woman. And she did this for a lot of people, a lot of small entrepreneurs. And so oftentimes your champions will be at big, huge companies. Don't worry if you're not doing business with them because they will lead you down a path and put you in the right place at the right time.
So how do you know when to identify that someone could be a champion for you?
You need to cultivate that relationship. And once you cultivate that relationship, then you know. I mean, it's not going to be immediately identifiable. It's not going to be like, oh, this person walking down the street who says, he's the CEO of AT&T. You're not going to immediately identify him.
Right.
But it's that cultivation of that relationship that you'll know.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll ask a question that you were scared to ask that could make the difference in your company.
Yep.
You ask that question, they answer honestly,
Yep.
cultivating relationships. Relationships matter. They matter.
100%. All right. So I'm 12 months in advance in the future. Okay. Describe to me as if my eyes were closed and you're describing to me what's present today. What have you worked your tail off for and what exactly is present tomorrow?
Amy is working part of the year from France and has systems and processes in place to allow for that 9-hour time difference. A mentorship program has also been created to empower those that are interested in what it really takes to run a business. I think there's another acquisition that has been had as well. And continuing the journey of inspiring those that have disabilities by encouraging them to share their journey, by encouraging them to not be afraid to disclose that they have a disability, that it's not a scarlet letter. I think that a book is in the works. And quite possibly maybe 15 months from now, I might be on the Today Show.
Beautiful. And this is an opportunity for everybody to truly understand is that the reason why that the question of what does the next 12 months look like, it's because it currently isn't necessarily present to anybody that you ask it for. And if you really want to be a contribution to the person who's sitting in front of you, then figure out exactly how to help them. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I had a blast.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.